Search intent is an area that writers tend to struggle with. Like, there are terms that are sometimes have multiple meanings, and trying to figure out what those multiple meanings are can be challenging. A really simple example is the sort of term crystal light. So crystal light can mean many different things. It can mean, Crystal Light the brand. It can mean crystal light like a chandelier. And so knowing what people might be querying or searching for or trying to get information about can be challenging.
Welcome to What If, So What? The podcast where we ask what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real in your business. I'm Jim Hertzfeld.
And I'm Kim Chopek.
And today we'll ask what if, so what? And most importantly, now what?
In our first episode of this season, where we talked ChatGPT with Brian Flanagan, I mentioned the content generated from these kinds of AI was the first time I had really considered a robot might be taking my job. Sure enough, last week, Forbes came out with an article echoing that same sentiment. And with the recent releases of ChatGPT-4 and Midjourney version 5, which can actually generate photorealistic images from natural language inputs, I have to think any content marketer is shaking in their boots. But the article made two important points. First, don't panic. The robots still aren't taking our jobs. And two, AI isn't a replacement for the creative process. It's an opportunity to look for ways to incorporate AI into your content marketing workflows that drive efficiency, not replace the creative process. So this brings me to our what if this time around. Jim, what if generative AI could be your full-time 24-hour content marketer on the team?
Hey, Kim, I have 100 things I'd like to hire a robot to do, not just generate content. But, it's a great time to be alive. The generative AI movement certainly hit peak awareness, but, it's still really early. But like with anything new, those will be resolved. I mean, there's inaccuracies and out-of-date information, and There's misinformation, and it's moving quickly. But I still think what's going on here is not just a shift in automating things, but it's really a shift in the way we even think about what we're trying to do. So content for years was you push it out, somebody consumes it, and in this sort of ideal generative AI world, the content is sort of coming at you as you ask it, right? It's really changed the whole mode with which we interact. So, it's not really what marketers are spending weeks or months agonizing over. It's like, what's the robot going to tell me right now? But, there's a lot of other things happening with content. We're in a cookieless world, right? We're in a post, GDPR, CCPA world. And, content, we talk about this a lot. Content needs to find a different mode as well. It needs to be short. Content is video. We got to keep people from scrolling. So, this is great to talk about content, but my so what is, do we really need more content anyway? And so I love this tension. I love this disruption. And as always, we have questions. And so we brought Eve Sangenito, who's a principal in our digital marketing team and content marketing veteran at Perficient. Eve, welcome to the podcast. Maybe you can start by setting us straight with a brief definition of what content marketing is today.
Thanks, Jim. Sure, happy to talk about that. Content marketing is actually not just about writing, which sometimes it's perceived that way, and it's actually not really intended to be about advertising either. It's really about creating and publishing and distributing valuable, relevant content and information to a targeted audience that has an interest in a specific type of information or area of focus. And the goal for businesses is really around building authority in those topic areas and becoming known for that authority and building trust and loyalty among following. So that's when it's working at its best. That's really what content marketing is all about. Content marketing has long been a tough arena for a lot of businesses and even sort of freelance writers who participate in it. A lot of people produce content. Like Jim mentioned, there's a lot of content out there. The concept of content noise has been around for a while, of like, how do you sort of mete out the content that's effective? When you're talking about quality content marketing, it's really, as I mentioned, building credibility and trust with readers. And that's a high bar that not many businesses can achieve. You have to bring a lot of things to the table in terms of expertise, in terms of looking at data and analysis and trying to understand what are the topics of interest or the content types of interest to your readers. And you need to continually produce over time. And so that can be exhausting. And in terms of the creative and ideation process and making sure that you're looking at the data and analysis to see that you're getting the kind of engagement that you're striving for. Generative AI can really help with that process. I know the sort of perception, or some perceptions are, that it could be the death of content, but actually I think it can be the elevation of it. If applied in the right ways, it can help content creators become a lot more strategic.
That's pretty interesting, Eve. And, the article I referenced, and we'll put the link in the show notes, talks about the effectiveness and efficiency you can get using AI through content generation. And you're talking about it being more strategic. That's probably a better way to put it. But beyond that, why would any business entertain using AI to generate content in their content marketing efforts? Maybe get down to, what does it mean to be more strategic or effective or efficient? What are the benefits? Why?
Sure. So as I was describing, like what the ideal of content marketing is, I would say this doesn't, in my opinion, change the standards of what high quality is. The North Star has really always been about putting out something unique that is not just, contributing to that noise and replicating the same information in a different form. It's been about bringing expertise in those different areas that we mentioned. Also trying to address the kinds of information that people are looking for. So being helpful and useful. And also understanding kind of the intent that you're trying to serve with that. Sometimes that's an area of content marketing that comes into play quite a bit. Is just, are you targeting the right intent? Are you actually giving them the information that they need? And people also expect that to be personalized and cater to them as well. Also, like in engaging formats, whether that be like actual formats like multimedia or different formats by channel, like different social media channels as an example. That requires an understanding of your audience that you're targeting, the skills to do insightful data analysis to really inform kind of your planning and what you want to be writing about and what you want to be publishing to engage with that audience. It requires that expertise that I mentioned. And one of the other areas that content creators often struggle with is in overall strategy planning and promotion. They write a piece of content, and then how do I make sure that I'm bringing it to the forays of where the people I'm trying to reach are spending time, and it's going to be easy and efficient for them to access. So that's really kind of the ideal of what you're trying to do with content marketing. And all of that is kind of hard.
Eve, one of the things that resonated with me, and you kind of said it a couple of times, is building authority and trust. And I get that because there is so much noise. The burden is on them to figure out, is this hype? Is it, much like this podcast, is it hype? Is it real? Is it not real? Like how do you go about, applying that, ensuring that, authority and trust is conveyed with great content?
There's a lot of different aspects. That one is to actually, be contributing information that is authoritative and quality, and meaning you're actually informing people of of things they do not know, or helping them elaborate on a concept. Another part of content marketing, which isn't so much about the writing piece, but about the engagement, is like creating a dialogue with your audience. So for example, if you publish a blog post, as like one simple example, and you don't engage or respond in the comments, that engagement is a way that you build that relationship as well. So it's a vehicle in many ways, both about surfacing that information, helping you build authority in areas that you want your audience to know that is a focus area for you, and you can come to this source to get sort of all the valuable information, but you can also engage and interact in various forms, and that relationship starts to build. Like you may think about different, content experiences that you follow, right? And in what way are they sort of elevating your interest areas or helping you, achieve a task or things like that. So knowing that that's the principles for content marketing, which I don't think have really changed, generative AI can be really helpful in a lot of different ways. So if you think about, the pressure of coming up with various different topic ideas, things that are going to resonate with your audience, be relevant to them, all of that takes a lot of different skill sets well beyond writing. And I think that's a misperception that occurs quite a bit. So one thing is data and analysis. Part of how you are informed by what is engaging your audience is the data that you can see about where the engagement is happening, the pages and topics of most interest, or, if it's video, what kinds of video are getting sort of more views. That data analysis requires a different kind of skill set to analyze. So you can actually use generative AI to synthesize that data and give you, like in layman's terms, the insights that you might have, your writers may struggle with, your strategists may struggle with gleaning. So that's one area. Another area is audience insights. So although we always recommend, in terms of our perspective, direct audience insights, voice of the customer or reader, so to speak, you can also start to get ideas about just what are typical generalized things that tend to be common areas of interest by a given audience. So it can start to give you ideation insights into what your readers may want. I think in the future, there's also a number of areas that are sort of still in development. So in the future, I think it can really help writers with understanding search intent potentially. Did a little testing on that, and it's not in terms of some of the tools that are readily available with some of the types of search intent queries that we would typically query in other tools. And maybe not quite as sophisticated there yet, but search intent is an area that writers tend to struggle with. Like there are terms that are sometimes have multiple meanings, and trying to figure out what those multiple meanings are can be challenging. A really simple example is the term crystal light. So crystal light can mean many different things. It can mean, Crystal Light, the brand. It can mean crystal light, like a chandelier. And so knowing what people might be querying or searching for or trying to get information about can be challenging. And so in theory, you can use some of these tools to sort of, give you variants that you might be perceiving if you're not using other tools that might not be available to you for budget reasons and things like that. It didn't quite get it right when I tried it in that case. That was a query that I tested, but I think it will continue to evolve in those areas. Another area is mining social media insights. So what are people talking about some of these topics today? There's a lot to synthesize there if you don't have access to the right tools, and it can again surface that in real time and give you some directions to at least consider and pursue. A few other areas where it takes a lot of planning and ideation are things like proprietary data studies. Proprietary data studies can be really effective form of content marketing because you're bringing very unique content, unique data that nobody else has brought to bear to the market, and hopefully on a topic that's going to, be useful to people. But coming up with those ideas that are going to sort of have that kind of traction and get the visibility and sometimes even media coverage can be a strategic effort that takes a lot of time and investment. So you can use it for ideation of things like that as well. In addition to different content types and derivatives, as an example, you plug in a page and say, write me a blog post about this page in that type of form. Write me a post that should be on a social media channel. That's another area, the content derivatives that arrive out of content marketing so that you're expanding the reach of your content can be a challenge in terms of just all of that needs to be factored in. What are the different requirements on the channels that you're writing on? If there's a visual component and you might not have the visual skill sets directly or have that big of a team in order to do that. So it can be really helpful there. Another area, like at a small scale level, is multilingual translation. You can plug in a page and ask it to tell you, how would that translate into these different languages? One area that's really evolving with some of the things that Kim mentioned at the beginning is visual media. It's getting really sophisticated. And so creating, supplemental visual media for your text-based content or even to stand on its own. And one other area is content performance analysis. So one thing that's a really important part of content marketing to see if it's working is benchmarking your content and then analyzing how it's performing over time based on different trends and data. And generative AI can help, analyze that for you.
That is fascinating. In particular, the visual aspect of what generative AI could do. Those are a lot of great hows, Eve. One of the things we always like to ask is, what is one thing a listener can do today to improve their content marketing or use AI more effectively in your content marketing efforts? What would you recommend?
I would say test it. So even though these are great ideas for supporting ideation or supplementing skill sets that you might not have on a team or that might have bandwidth issues, there are quality issues still, and that is one of the areas that's really important if you're going to use generative AI for, even ideation. You've got to make sure that your understanding is it accurate, the information that you're getting back, and what kinds of scenarios can you use. So testing it is, I think, a great start, and you want to incorporate QAing within your testing process so that you can get used to that process of, okay, this might be a great idea that I sort of got out of a query that I put in or something along those lines, or the output that I got for a visual. But you want to make sure that you're sort of QAing as part of that process, because a lot of times there is inaccuracy still. It's still in its infancy. And so just getting that into the form and the approach, I think, is one first start that content marketers can take.
It makes a lot of sense. So maybe you shouldn't staff your entire content marketing team with AI, but with the right approach and definitely the right quality assurance, to your point, generative AI can make good content creators, good inspiration, and maybe make your teams more effective, letting them focus on what they're really good at, which I think is the human part. Thanks so much, Eve, for the great conversation today, all human generated, by the way. We look forward to hearing from our next expert on the next episode of What If, So What?
You've been listening to What If, So What, the digital strategy podcast from Perficient with Jim Hertzfeld and Kim Chopek. We want to thank our Perficient colleagues, JD Norman and Rick Bauer, for our music today. Subscribe to the podcast and don't miss a single episode. You can find this season along with show notes at perficient.com. Thanks for listening.